Okay.
It was a great, very nice visit. Thanks to the department for the hospitality. And yeah, I look forward to meeting all.
So maybe because we are only a few of us, we can give a brief introduction, so that I don't know some of you actually. So it would be nice if you can just say a few words about your name and where in the program you are, what you're doing. Yeah.
Sure. My name is Mehtad Mohammadi. I'm a third year PhD student. And what else there?
So are you like working on your thesis or?
Yes, kind of. I'm working on reinforcement learning with Sir Rochin Q.
Okay.
And hope to go somewhere.
Sure.
My name is Deep. I'm in second year, and I'm also from ISI.
Okay.
I'm currently working on high-dimensional time series.
Okay. With who?
With Professor Jocelyn Shaw.
Okay. Sure.
Hi, I'm Jaydeep. I'm a third year PhD student in working with Professor Fanglia on double descent.
Hi, I'm a third year PhD student. My topic, the research topic I'm working on is optimal transport. I work with Professor Xiaopei.
Hi, I'm Anvesha. I'm a third year PhD student. I work with Naveen.
And Bo, right?
And with Naveen, I work on variable selection in a multi-output high-dimensional setting. And with Bo, I have an applied project on West Nile virus trap location.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Abhishek. I am a fourth year PhD student, and I work with Naveen in high-dimensional inference problems, especially in post-selection inference.
Okay. Cool.
I'm Vikram. I'm a fifth year PhD student, and I work with Georgios in sequential multiplication, and I also work with Subhuda and cross-validation and signal organizing.
I'm David Lundquist. I'm in my fourth year, and I work with Daniel Eck on methods in time series prediction and structural change.
Okay, cool. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So now the time for questions. so the first question I have for you is, so what do you consider to be like some key qualities that will help somebody being a successful researcher and academic? And how do you think one can develop such qualities?
Okay, for a successful researcher, yeah, I think you should have like intellectual honesty. So trying to pursue something honestly, not like just because you're doing something, it's good or whatever. So it's trying to honestly pursue something, and trying to maybe view things in the big picture a little bit. Like where do things fit in with everything else? Like what other people have been doing for many past years and so on. Yeah, and also trying to, make it very clear what you're doing to other people so they can give you feedback. And for example, if you're teaching or if you're giving a talk or something, try to, just make things very, very clear. So that will only clarify things for you. Yeah, so I think these are, I'm not so sorry, that's not a very well prepared answer, I guess.
That's very good. Yeah, actually, yeah. On the similar lines, I feel like I always found you like very, very good communicator. I feel you give very nice talks and teach well. So, I mean, can you give us some tips on how to like organize oneself to communicate well? And
talks, I think you should just picture someone who is like an undergrad or something, and then try to explain things to them. You should, because it's very easy to get caught up in the jargon if you try to talk to somewhat more advanced audience. So you have to make things very simple, so that it'll be easier for you to see connections to what maybe some other people are doing, and it will clarify things in your mind. So just try to make things as simple as you can, and then try to build it up a little bit. I mean, of course, the whole talk cannot be fully elementary. Try to at least make things very simple. And because what happens is a lot of people, when they work on certain things, it's actually closely connected to things in other fields very nearby. But you don't see the connections because you're kind of a bit deep in the woods, so to say. So make things really simple, and Yeah, talk is a good opportunity. I like undergrad teaching also because you can't hide in the math, right? Because you have to tell them and then show them that things work and so on. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's very helpful. Any questions from you following up?
So I have a small question.
Yes.
So the talk you gave yesterday, that was very clear, at least for me, at least very clear. Do you also give the same slides and talks in a more advanced, like more close-up community who work on this?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So if it's a workshop where if it's a 20-minute talk or something, so where you have researchers,
Yes. So you have small amount of
Yes.
time, but you have to be deep in the research. So
Yeah, so even there I would cut out some technical details, but I won't change the like easy introduction and so on, because the reason is there'll be probably a few people who are not in the area, and yeah, so this is a choice that you have to make. If you kind of assume that the audience already know all of this, so they only want the technical parts of it, then I think you'll lose out on some important members of the audience. Yeah, but it's a little bit of a trade-off also, because if you try to make it too simple, then people might say, they might miss the point of the work. Yeah, so it's
Right.
yeah, so you have to. It's a balance, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
So on the same
Yeah.
topic of communication,
Yeah.
so also about writing papers, right? And that's an area that a lot of early researchers and graduate students struggle with.
Yeah.
Of they do good work, but they do not necessarily know how to like communicate it in writing very
Yeah.
well. So how is it for you, like when you were like a grad student or an early researcher? Was it natural for you, or like did you like hone your skills in specific way that can help us and the graduate students learn from your experience?
Yeah. So writing is you have to do it like iteratively, because once you write something, at that point you might think that you've done a good job. This is probably the best you can do. But like for example, I wrote an NSF grant. This is like a career award. It's like somewhat big grant. Okay, so I wrote it in. So usually the deadline is like November or something, and I sent it to them, and they rejected it, which is, I mean, it happens very commonly. But and then they said, these problems are narrow. It's not very clear, and so on. So then I was, of course, a bit disappointed. And then I didn't look at it for like, I mean, I can go over, I can reapply it the next year. So I didn't look at the grant for like 7 or 8 months until next summer, where I am like, okay, I have to write this again now. Then I went back and looked at my grant. I was like, this is horrible. This is like, no wonder they didn't fund it. So that is important. So when you take a step back and then look at it again, you realize that it's not, I mean, of course, you're also intellectually growing every day, hopefully. So now when you go back, so writing, it's better to do it like that. So write something and then talk to some people, and then a few days later you go back, and yeah. But this is all it's also a matter of luck or something. So sometimes you may not see that this is a actually badly written paper until you send it out or something, or even after it gets accepted, it gets published, then you realize, oh, this is bad. Then you can't do much about it. So yeah, so just do the best that you can, and try to just keep in mind the possibility that you may not have done a good job.
So is there like a specific metric or set of metrics that you evaluate when you're going through your own papers to see how clearly it is written or room for improvement, or it's just an instinct or intuition that you just scan through the paper and feel?
So it's not only about the writing, right? It's also about the idea and the work. So they're all good, they're all fit together. So the frustration often is that, yeah, it's good, it's solving something, but this is not the real problem that people care about, or most in this. So that's the frustration. But you don't know how to solve the real problem. This is all the only thing you can solve. So you can do a very good job at writing it, but still it doesn't, it's not very satisfactory. So that's the thing. So in these cases, it's better to be upfront, saying, look, there are still these important questions. So yeah, I mean, try to just honestly write, and make sure that you're not claiming something that you're not sure about, things like that. You say, maybe in a technical proof, you say, oh, you can do this, but you haven't actually done it, and things like that. So
like, because I have already spent so much time on that problem, so when I have written something about it, maybe those things are clear to me. But
yes,
to a new reader who may not be familiar with that particular field, and so it might not be very clear to that person.
yeah.
So like, how do I switch this in my mind? So while maybe evaluating my own writing, because to me that particular paragraph might make sense, but to others that won't be that sensible.
Yeah, it's a good question. If you have a friend or someone like another professor, not other than your advisor, who you might just ask them to, can you at least look at some parts of the paper, not the whole paper, maybe the introduction of them. So that helps. If you don't have anybody like that, or maybe the people don't have time to do this, then you have to maybe, just try to put yourself in the shoes of someone. Yeah, it's a little bit hard. And then, maybe think about, okay, you're from statistics, it comes someone from computer science is reading. What would they say? I mean, would they agree with all of this way of thinking to solve the problem, or things like that? Yeah.
I think that's a question about
Yes.
Coming up with ideas, but also knowing when to move on from bad ideas. I have a few questions, but let me ask one of them.
Sure.
Can you recall, are there other times when, okay, you've got an idea, and you can come to that idea in at least a few ways? You can have some sort of brilliant insight, or you can have tried many things, and this particular idea seems to work, and you try to find some sort of motivation for it. But sometimes none of those things happen. Sometimes you keep going, and you just can't get the thing to work. So yeah, I'd be curious, this is a vague question, but you must have abandoned projects.
Yeah.
And when do you abandon them? How do you know to do that?
Yeah, so that's a good, I mean, so you only abandon something if if you realize clearly that is just wrong. Okay, so that if you, once you get that realization, then you just try to, I mean, it's easy for me to abandon things, but if there's a student involved, it becomes a little tricky. So then you try to work around or do something, or at least honestly say that, look, you've tried this, it doesn't work for these reasons. If you can write a paper on that, that's fine too. But generally, the trick here is to, when you start on the project, like, what made you think that this can work? Right. So this is so there, if you spend more time, you might not have to face the situation later on. Yeah.
Like when you start the project, like the reading part or something, like getting more insights whether this can work or not, because
Yeah,
I mean, once we get into, like, my question is like, once we get into the details, like, then we have to wait for a long time to see whether it actually works or not, right?
right,
Like the
right.
math or something.
Yeah.
So,
So
like, I just want to know.
yeah. So I mean, of course, there are no like universal answers. These are like hard questions. But basically, once so in a statistical context, right? So you probably are thinking about some statistical procedure which you think is reasonable in a particular problem, and now you may want to prove that it works or something like that for like a concrete. Now you have to see what is how did you come up with that procedure in the first place, right? Is it based on some like some standard or some well-known statistical procedures like say maximum likelihood or something, or is it something that you know has is a little bit less maybe founded in history or something like that. So and then of course, can you actually demonstrate on data or something like that that it actually is working? So you can demonstrate it on data, and it's very clear that anybody who can see this will tell you that this is doing something highly non-trivial, let's say. Then you can step into to try to actually prove something, right? Of course, whether you uh, the mathematical proofs are probably not super relevant to the practice and use of the method, but you probably want to prove it for some more theoretical justification of the whole idea. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, if you want to get into philosophy of statistics, it's all about, in statistics, you're fundamentally dealing with uncertainty, right? Like, so any procedure that you come up with is always dealing with uncertainty. So you cannot like, whether something works or not is not something that you can actually prove it or, yeah. So I like Bayesian statistics a bit these days. So I tend to think in terms of that. So if you actually solve a problem by trying to put an honest prior, and then that's how you're trying to solve the problem, that has some grounding in history. So you cannot really seriously go wrong unless the prior that you impose is probably not aligned with the problem that you're trying to solve. But if you try to do some other method, then yeah, you should be a bit more careful. Yeah. So in my own case, it's not, I usually, abandoning projects is not something that I've had to do. But what is an issue is to actually come up with a concrete version of the problem. So that takes a long time. It's like, oh, I want to do something in this space, but somehow the few ideas that I don't have, that I have right now, don't seem to be some of the right ones. To actually go from that stage to a concrete, thing that is working in a convincing way, that sometimes takes years. So
I guess when you advise students, part of the job that you have is to not let them get to a state where they need to abandon something. Don't let them pursue a bad idea or something that's not well motivated.
Yes.
So along the similar lines, like
Yeah.
at this stage, like I have been basically pursuing a problem which Naveen has suggested.
Yeah.
But like if I had to think of an independent problem, I don't precisely have anything in mind, to be honest. So like in your career, like how did you transition from maybe working on some existing variations of problems to like designing a problem of your own? So something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is of course the hardest
Yeah.
question. So yeah, I mean, you should use the advisor to actually like also have general discussions about research, what many other people are doing, what are the interesting trends, and so on. And not just to your advisor, talk to other people also to get a general feel of where the field is going. And then but yeah, I mean, you might have a lot of general good ideas, but concretely trying to come up with a problem is hard initially. That's for sure. So for that, Yeah, I mean, the only way is to read some papers. I mean, like if you want to formulate a problem all by yourself, trying to read some papers. I mean, of course, the easiest thing is to do whatever project that you're currently doing right now, do it very well, and then explore directions which are somewhat similar to it. So try to read papers in related areas. But invariably, the initial problems that you might come up with may not be so interesting. But you can still pursue them because it's for your own intellectual growth. It's not like you're trying to save the field or something. So just honestly pursue them, and then slowly, the quality will improve. Yeah. Yeah.
And like, what if I want to move to, let's explore a new field, a completely new field?
Yeah.
Then what is your suggestion for that? Like,
So yeah, I mean, you can do it. So obviously you must have some motivation for that field, right? So in general, I think the way to understand the field is to identify maybe 3 to 4 to 5 important papers in the field and try to learn them very thoroughly, as opposed to taking 20 papers and just not fully understanding the main ideas. So take 4 or 5 papers and try to spend time and try to properly understand it. And then if you do that, well, you might be able to formulate your own problems. But trying to talk to people is actually very important because
to know the problem or concept of what.
yeah, or you might think, oh, I'm thinking of this as an interesting field to get into. What do you suggest? Because some senior researcher might say, oh, don't do that. That field is dead because there's some other field which is dominating that. Or the same kind of problems you can solve in a much more general way using these techniques or something. And that will save you years of effort.
I think that's where like also going to conferences which are really related to the topics of your interest, not big general conferences, but more focused type of conferences can help, especially early in the pursuits. If you go make connections, talk to people there, and get direct feedback, that will be very helpful.
So that is of course great, but these days everything is on YouTube also. A lot of very, like, so for example, I don't know, in this machine learning or something, is like diffusion models, which is the hottest thing. You go to YouTube and you can listen to talks delivered last month on diffusion models. You can learn it. So use like YouTube and things like that. Anything else? Any further questions on the same topic? Yeah.
Questions. So, what general suggestion or tips that you could give to a student who is aiming to an academic job?
Aiming for an academic job.
Other than doing a good research.
Yeah.
What does he or she should be prepared for?
I think independence is important. I mean, working with your advisor is good, but you should be able to, so that the yardstick is that the advisor should be able to say that you know more than them at the end of your thesis in that area. So that's, if that happens, then that's great. So independence is very important. And also, some sense of what is, this is called maturity, maybe, like what is an important problem to solve. Yes. That, yes. To the field, yeah. Sure. Yeah. So that it's a little bit hard to get that as a junior student. Because either you focus on technical depth, which is of course very important. So without technical depth, you won't be able to write papers actually. So technical depth here in terms of math skills or actually coding or whatever, doing data analysis, being able to program things and so on. So that depth is super important. But at the same time, having a broader view of the field will be very helpful. Yeah.
So along this similar line of technical depths. So like personally, because I am from not from stat background in undergrad, and like coming here, then I am realizing that okay, what this stat is really about.
Yeah.
But I don't have like I have not done the courses that I should have done in my undergrad. So like I don't feel confident about knowing certain mathematics or maybe connections between two similar looking methods. So like what are your suggestions in order to improve this, because later I'll have to be confident about these things.
Yeah, I mean, see, technical depth is not about courses. So I'm talking about a specific thing in your area, let's say. So someone told me that if you want to get technical depth in an area, say mathematics, let's say, from a mathematical point of view, what you have to do is to find three to five important papers in that area, and then read them very, very thoroughly. Like as a student, you should know, you should be able to justify every equation written in that paper. Something like that. This will take time, maybe a year, but that will give you a solid foundation that you can build up on later on. If you don't do that thoroughly, at some point in your life, if you're in an academic career, at some point you will basically fizzle out essentially. So the foundation is very important. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. And it's not about courses, because courses generally they're not so thorough that they'll teach you to.
Not in that sense, but
Yeah.
like so whatever I'm focused on problem right now, if someone comes up to me and asks something slightly on a different angle or something closely related to that, I don't have much idea
Yeah.
about those methods or how even like what are the slight differences.
Right. Yeah, I mean
So-
that happens to you and me and everybody. So it's just you just learn that then.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so slowly you expand your knowledge.
I think that can happen to even very senior faculty, because not everybody knows
Yeah.
everything, right? So there'll be definitely some nearby fields or connections that we will have to learn eventually, and that's where the new learning happens. So there's nothing to be like afraid of. Not knowing is not a sin,
Yeah.
right? So we just learn. Any other questions from students? Otherwise, you have a question? Oh, okay. So yeah, there was a question from. So actually, some students gave me questions beforehand. There's a question about like how was the journey for you, like from being a student to making the decision for doing a PhD, to making a decision about academic career. So how was that process for you, and what made it, was it always clear for you, or there were some indications eventually that you relied upon to make the call? And like overall, like how's the journey, and what have you learned?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, after college, I of course I wanted to study more and applied for PhD programs, and that's how I went to Yale to do my PhD. And the PhD there was interesting. So Yale was like a small department at that time. Now it's a little bit bigger. It's statistics and data science now. At that time, it was statistics, quite small. My advisor was David Pollard. I don't know if you've heard of him. So he's of course a famous probabilist and theoretical statistician. He's written very influential books on empirical processes and so on. But he was towards the end of his career at that time. Yeah, so he would meet with me every week, but it was more like we would just chat about whatever I wanted to chat about. It's not like giving some concrete problems or something. So I had to do a lot of trying to find interesting problems. He would suggest me to say, okay, you can read these papers, it's an important paper. But it was a little bit of a struggle to actually find something to do. So that was my goal at the time. Just find something to do. Forget about whether that's important. Just some problem. And there were other faculty also, like Andrew Barron, for example, Harry Zoe.
Andrew will be coming here next
Oh,
semester.
Okay. Yeah, he's a very great guy. So yeah, so I talk to them and then find some things and do something. So I got like one or two papers in my PhD. Yeah, maybe 3 papers or whatever. Yeah, and then in my 5th year, I was like, okay, maybe I can apply for some jobs, and, or industry, whatever. So you first apply to academia. And if not, then get a postdoc or something in that industry. And then I applied to these places, and I don't know why Berkeley decided to give me the job. So yeah, it was just a bit of a shock to me because like, okay, why would anyway, so then I took that job. I went there, and yeah, I mean, it's all like, okay, now at that stage I can do certain things, like I know I can do these things, but how do they fit in the big picture? No idea, basically. But you still keep doing them, and then so when I went to Berkeley, I was asked to teach time series, actually. So I was teaching time series, and I would just open this time series book, and there's like all these ARMA models, and like what is stationarity, causality, we get into all of this. And yeah, and then my research is in like some totally different direction. I couldn't connect any of this. It was a very interesting time. I started working with Bodhi Sen at Columbia. So we had some fun, trying to do some interesting things. So we were doing this field of non-parametric regression, where you put some constraints on the functions, shape constraints. And then slowly, okay, I understood what non-parametric is. The problem is that these books are not, if you try to read something from a book, it's like, first of all, there's so much stuff in there. The ideas are probably 1 or 2 ideas. Those ideas you don't get by reading so many pages. So that requires experience, and someone, maybe here an advisor or someone, a mentor or someone can help actually. But anyway, so there's a lot of struggle initially, and then somehow I got into all these problems, and then I realized that okay, so a lot of people are doing a lot of things, but the ideas are actually very few, and then you can do more interesting things, and then and things like that. So that it just happens slowly. I don't know how it happened, but it happened, and and that's how things unfolded after that. Yeah. So yeah.
So 2 questions. So I was wondering to know that how did you decide to go to academia? So was that like something that you were 100% sure about that, or you were wondering, but comparing industry and academia?
Yeah.
So what was your viewpoint in that time, and what's your viewpoint right now? I mean, if you would like to compare these two. And my second question is that just looking at your website, I saw that you also had a 6 months as a postdoc in Wharton. How did you find doing a postdoc something necessary, or something maybe not that much of a difference after the graduation?
Yeah.
And one more question, which I will leave it after this.
Okay. So I had no idea about industry actually. I did an internship at the AT&T labs once. That was more like a research setting. So I didn't know what people do in industry. I still don't know actually. So then I first applied for academic jobs because I thought, okay, let me just apply, because you apply them early, right, in your 5th year. Industry jobs I can search for in the spring. And then I got this job, and then I decided to take it. So it's not like I made it an active decision to go to academia or something. It just happened, and I just took it. So that's what happened. These days, some of my students are in industry. I think industry is very interesting these days because they have more data. For example, they're probably doing more impactful things. Especially if there are some students, like I had a student who was a very bright student, but he just couldn't work by himself. That was his weakness. Like he would work great in a group. He was like, whenever we had meetings, he had lots of ideas, and we would, 3 hours or so, we would code things up and then do things. And then I say, okay, maybe we are on the right track, but we haven't completely solved the problem. So why don't you go and figure it out or something? And then 1 week, nothing happens. Then again, so he's very bright, full of ideas, but he can't work by himself. So for him, industry is perfect, right? Because work in a team on some important problems. So that's great. Academia, yeah, I don't think it would have fit him. So something like that. So if you are that kind of a person, and if you like people, like Google, there are like millions of people, hundreds of, a lot of activity there. Sure, I think industry is very good. If you try to like to think by yourself, and you want your independence to do what you want, and you have some ideas, and or you want, you like teaching, for example, then academia is good. By some way. Yeah, your question about postdoc. Yeah, so after I got the academic job, I also got that postdoc offer, and I deferred my academic by 6 months. So postdocs, from what I hear now, are great, especially if you have a postdoc with no teaching, because then it's like, so someone said this, that if I get a tenured postdoc position at Berkeley, I'll take it. Because then you don't have to teach. You're just sitting there, and all these PhD students, if you want, you can work with them. And then you just, so that's a great thing. So teaching is actually a big thing if you're doing it for the first, it takes a lot of your time away. So if you can defer that, have some time to just write papers or something, that's actually very good.
So what should be like an expectation from the postdoc? Wanting to decide where to go or no, what should I expect at the end to achieve that? Accompanying in that, so if I would like to put my feet on the shoes of someone who has been hiring in the search committee for an academic. So what does he look for 2 different people? That one is just only coming from grad school, and the person who is only coming from the postdoc, how would be his viewpoint different? And one other question which I should have probably asked previously about comparing academic industry. So one step more ahead in the academia. Apparently one milestone is for person to get tenure if they're in tenure track position. What are the milestones required for a person to achieve after 5-6 years? So if that's something that I know that probably I can see whether I'm good fit for that one or no. And then yep, that's basically.
Okay. The first question was what do people look for in postdocs?
Yeah,
Okay.
One is going to postdocs, one is not going a search committee. What do they expect from each of them to know?
Yeah. So yeah, this is I think if you're a postdoc, you're applying for a job position, you need to demonstrate more productivity. If you have the productivity and you have the track record that look, I've done so much, you will do better than a person who's directly applying from a PhD. But if your postdoc was maybe you were exploring a new area or something and you're not able to produce so much, the junior person will be given more preference. So that's the way it works. Right. So if you get a postdoc, you have to work very hard. It's not, it's like from a career point of view, your productivity has to be visible on paper. So yeah.
Sometimes they say that it's better to do a postdoc in a different area or something like that. So is this true or?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because if I do on same area, I can produce much more papers.
Yeah.
because
So
derivative papers can come up from my previous work.
right. So
If I try a new,
if you do a new area,
there's a risk, but also some reward. As well.
yeah. So if you try a new area, let's say, my suggestion would be spend 2 or 3 years in your postdoc. Do something in the new area. Also write some papers from the old area. And then apply. Because if you jump an area, completely leave your old area, have nothing to show in your 2 or 3 years of postdoc. It's hard to.
Right.
Yeah.
So just keeping a balance between.
Yeah. I mean, spend most of your time on the new area, of course. But you
don't have to spend much more time in the old area.
Yeah.
Because you have some expertise.
Right.
Also, like it depends on like where your papers are, right? So as you're graduating, it's not like all your papers would have been, or projects that you had worked on would not have come as publications come out. So if, for example, you're anticipating there will be several papers that will come out in the 1 year or so, even without you spending too much time, then you can take the risk, more risk of going to a new area. But it's like you still have to spend a lot of time to get those papers out. Then you're thinking of a new area that will be a risky thing, right? So you have to check the status and then jump.
Right. Your next question was on tenure.
Yes. Milestones.
Yeah. Tenure is a little bit. I think tenure is not as hard as getting a job in the first place. So, especially these days, I think it's getting easier and easier because, in the interest of fairness and so on, because tenure is something where some exploitation can happen, and those things I think are going down. So tenure is a little bit easier. So you have to make sure that, yeah, I mean, just work hard and don't stop doing research or something. I think you should be fine for tenure. Unless you're in a private school or something. Historically, things are hard. Even there, if they give you the job, then they want to give you a tenure. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that now. Yeah.
But not just trying to know the roadmap that each of these two we're going, what would be the challenges based if any of those routes going to be chosen. I should just expecting that this should be that I will be facing, and the other one is
that sure. I mean, certainly it can be stressful. Yeah, no doubt. Because you have to balance quite a few things. That's the big difference from a student to a faculty. It's not like I want to spend 2 weeks thinking about this. You can't do it. Maybe 2 days is also hard. So you have to switch. You have to teach. Some student wants to talk about something. You may have to do some reviewing and other committee work or whatever. Yeah. So, and the more senior you go, things get more hard. Yes.
Okay, so when you're thinking about an academic job, you're mostly thinking about research and but you have to teach, right? So
Yeah.
how's your experience been with like teaching? Was it as you expected it to be, or did it turn out to be different?
I actually like teaching, so I think, the way it worked out is because I've taught this time series. I teach like undergrad, linear modeling, master's probability. It sort of gave me a bit more breadth of the field. The research that turns out to be a bit narrow. I haven't started working in time series, but I have some ideas now. Maybe do some things. So teaching is, yeah, I mean, it's the challenging part is to, biggest challenge is to teach something that you're not fully know, basically. That's the biggest challenge. Yeah. So, like I walk into a class teaching armor models, and a student asks, "Yeah, these are 50-year-old things. What do people do now?" I don't know. So that's the issue, right? So that's the challenge. If I know everything, then teaching is fun, right? Then it's like you're educating people, and it's so that knowledge gap is the issue with teaching. So that will, it will improve with time if you try to honestly think in that direction. Like, look, I need to know this because otherwise I can't go in and teach time series, right? So it's a bit like that. So yeah.
Are you like, is this government like all departments over the board that you're given a course to teach as opposed to like it being similar to your research area?
Well, the department has its own needs, right? It needs to teach all these courses. So you will get courses that are very far from your research area. And I think that's a good thing, because if you only teach your research area, you will never learn anything that is out there, which might actually, be a bad thing for your intellectual development. So yeah, so you'll have to, so it's I just teach whatever they ask me to teach. I mean, we have to fill out some preferences, but the chair has to take care of a lot of things. So she will just assign whatever she thinks is the priority. Just go by. Yeah, it's good to be a good citizen of the department also, not like complain about small things. Yeah.
Usually, I mean, most departments, we don't really have an active choice of what we teach. It's like, yeah, we may have some preferences. But I remember in Michigan, usually most faculty teach the same course for like decades. It's very different from here. Here we rotate a lot.
I see.
So I remember like the same like math stat course is taught by the same person for like 15 years or something, right? but here they deliberately try to rotate so that we get like a different flavor of teaching, and also students get like different instructors. Yeah. Actually, I also wanted to go back to your question about like the tenure, and I also thought you were asking about what are the like requirements to get tenure. I mean, although it's not probably so difficult these days, but like I think you were wondering about what is required like to achieve before somebody can be tenure. I think one of the things that often comes up is like grants, other than research and teaching, like in terms of publications or student evaluations. You also need to like demonstrate that.
Yeah, so I mean, this varies actually. In our department, we have senior faculty categorically saying that money is not a factor in you getting tenure. So, but I think it's good to get grants. Yeah, it's very important to get grants. Again, I think the main thing is when you're writing a proposal, you're thinking about your research at a big picture, at a high level. That is important. Not the actual money. I mean, those are important probably, but the main thing is your own intellectual growth. So, and you get feedback, right? I mean, the feedback is like, oh, this grant proposal is totally crap. That's actually useful feedback. So I mean, you might not like it then, but when you reflect on it, it's actually very, very important. So just just try to push yourself, write grants. You know.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So this might not be very relatable, but like whenever, like in your student days maybe, so you are trying to solve a problem, but then you get stuck. But like in my case, I can only think in one direction. If that doesn't work, then I don't have any other ways to maybe approach it.
Yeah.
So like, how do you develop it? Because you will need to eventually have multiple approaches in order to make it.
Yeah.
So like, do you have some suggestions?
Okay, so usually, if you genuinely feel that you don't have any other ideas, genuinely, then you're actually in a good space, because then that means you have exhausted everything, right? So you know everything about that problem. But normally what happens is, look, I think if I read that paper, I'll be able to do something, but that paper is so technical. So that's where you're at. But if you actually read that and then, oh, it's not working, now I have no idea, and genuinely you have no idea, then actually your brain has wrapped itself around the problem completely, and you might just get the idea somehow. It's a little, it doesn't always work, but yeah, I think that's my take.
So like spending more time on maybe like understanding everything about a particular paper.
Or I mean, if you think there is an idea, you fully exhausted. Only because unless you're fully exhausted, you will not even say that I have no idea, right?
No, that's exactly what has actually happened. That some complicated math is there which I maybe don't want to go into.
Right.
So I like, there is no idea, but then when I spend some time, then I'm like, that was there.
Yeah, exactly.
That has
So,
We create our own intellectual barriers,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
just set a limit for ourselves, but we have to slowly break those.
yeah. Will you stop by from the restroom?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. What you're Jaideep, right? And you're
I'm deep.
Deep.
Just
Oh, that's just there's some similarity between your names, and you're in second year.
Right.
Okay. Nice. Your name again? Pang. Oh, okay. And you are working with Shahui. Oh, okay. Nice, nice. You guys come to the office these days? The tech
I
plaza?
see, yeah, most of us here.
Except Anvesh.
You should also come.
Yeah, I
Peer
mostly work with-
effect.
Before COVID, like the offices used to be full,
Okay.
but then people stopped coming. So
I
maybe
generally, yeah, because our office, the space that we have second and third years doesn't have any windows, and I just cannot work without sunlight.
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's very depressing.
So yeah, working
Only
without-
for the seniors they have
No,
windows.
even then, The tales of new building.
Yeah, I mean, I still have some questions, but if anybody else wants to ask. So, I mean, we were talking about work quite a bit, but I was also going to ask about like work-life balance. And that's something that many students talk to me about when they're making the decision of, about academia versus industry. And a lot of times students complain that academics don't have much of a work-life balance and their work occupies their life. And that's a trigger against going to academia for some people. And I just would like your thoughts on what it is for you and how.
I think industry has better work-life balance. I think. I mean, I don't know fully about industry, but from what I see, the problem with academia, I think it's just that you're trying to do too many things. Because you have to teach, you have to do research, you have to advise students, you want to read and learn new things. And then you have all this committee work and like administrative work. And then a lot of the time, Monday to Friday is spent on all of these things. If you want to learn a new area, it just goes into your weekend. So that's somehow, I think that's not a good thing. So if you can integrate your teaching and your research so that it goes into like one integrated thing, then you can maybe achieve a better work-life balance. But of course, work-life balance is also about efficiency. If you can, if 2 hours, you get 2 hours and you can efficiently utilize those 2 hours, then of course you'll have time for other things. And my efficiency is not very good, so I'm trying to improve that somehow. Yeah, actually, as grad students, you can improve your efficiency, then you will have a better life later on. Yeah, so
I think as an academic, like going back to your question, I think one of the important aspects is to do multitasking, right? You have so many things, as Aditya was mentioning, to take care of. And that was one of the first things I really learned about as I came here, was there are so many things I had to like suddenly take care of, right? And then I was suddenly at a loss of how to manage the time. And if you actually do not become very disciplined about it, on very organized on how to do these things, I think then a lot of time gets wasted, and basically it goes into your time in the life, right? So I think being efficient is very important. Also, another thing is I feel like in academics we have a lot more flexibility compared to like a 9-to-5 job, right? So that can be a good thing or a bad thing, in the sense that if you know how to like utilize that flexibility, that can work out positively for us. But if you're not efficient and not good at managing a flexible time schedule, that can really become a terror.
Yeah, actually, I would advise you guys to also have like a fixed time, like maybe work from 9 to 5 and then don't work later, something like that. That will force you to be efficient in those. Yeah. Because eventually you'll have to kind of do that, because you can't just, when I was a student during the day, I probably wouldn't do much, and then work at night. Those things don't really. I mean, especially if, like, I have family, like 2 kids and so on, it's just not feasible. Yeah. So.
So what are some suggestions that can be more efficient, like do something in less amount of time? Like, I know one thing is like concentration or something, but like any general suggestion on that?
Try to, well, it sounds a bit contradictory, but try to avoid multitasking a bit. Focus on one thing at a time. If you're thinking about a problem, spend the whole week only thinking about the problem. Try to do something. Yeah. Because, the brain kind of loses its power if you force it to alternate between multiple things. So anyway, I mean, there are many people who can give you much more, solid evidence on this.
Drugs, maybe.
What?
Drugs.
What was that?
I mean, I would say just kidding. Drugs probably.
He's joking. Anyways, no, actually, one thing that I think of about efficiency in my own work is, so there are basically different levels of work we do, right? For example, when I'm thinking about like a new problem, a new technique that I want to develop, I have to be very focused and completely like focus my mind on it. But for example, if I'm just editing the paper that I had already written like several months back, it doesn't really take a lot of my brain power to do that. I mean, of course, it's better to be focused, but still, even if I'm less focused, it still would do the job, right? So what I typically do is I alternate between these types of works. So when I'm really tired and I don't feel like I can focus anymore on a really like deep problem or deep thing, I try to switch to like editing something or reviewing something. I think most people do that, but I'm just saying it out. So you just have to, instead of like completely wasting that time because of the fatigue, it's better to like do some low level jobs that still need to be done, right? So I think that knowing that, that's why sometimes I advise students, when you're not thinking over the problem, like, just do some simulations or send these simulations to the job, right, to the cluster. So you have to alternate, and also it's helpful to plan these things ahead of time. So you can think, look, for this week I will solve these problems, but at the same time I'll also work on the writing of the paper or the simulation. So you have to categorize the different tasks you have and then appropriately send them at the right time off your table.
So you probably know the mathematician Terence Tao. So he does a lot of things. He writes a blog, he teaches and writes tons of research papers every year. So he has some advice on how to be efficient, how to manage your time on his website. Read up on that. On his blog or website somewhere. Yeah.
Sorry, saying the name.
Terry Tao.
Terry Tao.
Or Terence Tao. Yeah.
Actually, going back to Aditya's comment about academia being not very good with work-life balance, my experience is the other way. Actually, because I was also working in industry before I came to PhD. So I feel like, yes, there are a lot of things to be done and there's much more responsibility in academia, but I always felt things are much more in my control. So it's like when I really have to, and when I need the time to be off and focus on my life, I have that flexibility to do so. And so I felt that it actually, at least subjectively, it has been a much better experience for me than being in the industry. And that's why I didn't return to industry. But definitely there's so much more responsibility. And so the preoccupation of the mind is much more when you're in the academics. But if you're very disciplined and organize yourself, the burden is much less. That's how I see it. Yeah. I think we have a new joinee. Is it?
Sorry, I just saw everybody and come.
Oh, that's fine. Do you mind introducing yourself?
I'm George Abdias, first year PhD student.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for joining. Yeah. Do you have any questions for Aditya?
No.
Nice to see you.
Yes. Any other questions? We have about 5 to 10 minutes, and if you have any further questions. So I have a question, which you kind of briefly mentioned about Yale, becoming a stat and data science department from being a small stat department, right? So there's been a lot of discussion about, data science, statistics, and statistics becoming more applied and catering to a larger group of people. So what are your thoughts on like the future of statistics, and it seems like now statistics is at the crossroads with it being at the focus of many different disciplines. And so I feel like it's also a challenge for students from statistics, because the competition is multifold, and the expectations are also multifold. Because nowadays statistics graduate student just graduating with a technical or a standard mathematical tool may not be considered as a strong statistics graduate. So what are your thoughts on the future, and also advice to students on how to tread these new waters?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I mean, I think statistics has some things to fear about in this data science revolution, because it's like, are we solving real problems? That's the question. Because if you're not, then are we at least thinking about real problems? Right. So that's an important question. I certainly feel that we have much to offer in these problems, but people have to be actively pursuing it. To me, I think some of the I mean, it's really a matter of so for example, to give an example of time series, if you want to learn about ARMA models, it's already very technically challenging. It's not so easy to even to learn others. But if you spend all of the time doing that, they are just linear models. You won't be able to do any interesting real life data analysis. So this is an issue with statistics, I think, because things are complicated. So most people are spending time on technical issues and not really trying to address important problems, I think. So that, I think, is something we need to get to. Okay. Now, data science, on the other hand, is probably driven mostly by people in applied domains, I think, like biologists, or trying to solve data problems in their field. So I think we can, we should be of help to them, trying to develop general principles for dealing with uncertainty and handling data. But this is something that we have to be aware of. One thing I like about statistics is we are an extraordinarily open field, in the sense that in our department, faculty jobs, we have a lot of computer science PhDs are getting those jobs now. This doesn't happen in economics, for example. You can't, for a person without a PhD in economics to get a job as a tenure track professor in economics is very, very rare. Statistics is fairly common, I think, these days. So that means that as PhD students, you're competing not only with other PhD students in statistics, but also with PhD students from computer science and from other departments. So it's a good thing to see what they are learning, what skills that they have that you don't have, and try to maybe pick some of those skills. Otherwise, the competitive edge might be a little bit lost. Yeah.
Are those CS PhDs, are they getting newly created jobs in stat departments, or are they taking jobs that stat PhDs previously would have gotten?
I think they're taking jobs. It's very easy. Just go to Stanford, see who they hired recently, stat department, see what their PhDs are in.
Oh yeah, I'm positing a world that never happened where those jobs just didn't open up. But yeah,
I don't think so, because stat department has an opening pretty much every once in 2 years or so.
Okay, so you're saying it's not the case that the stat department jobs are growing more quickly than before because the field is enlarging in scope?
Well, it could be that could be the case, but the point is that those jobs are coming up in statistics department. So maybe they're getting these positions because of the popularity of data science, but still it's a job in a stat department, and you would expect that to go to statistician or someone with a stat PhD. But that's not happening. Like in Berkeley, for example, I think our most recent hire, he's probably a statistician, you can say. But the hire before applied math PhD, before computer science PhD, before that a physics PhD. So there's like a lot of people getting these jobs. So this actually, someone said that if suppose a physics department, if they noted that even 10% of important contributions in physics are being made by PhDs in economics, let's say, suppose, then they'll immediately look at their curriculum and then look at what those economists are learning and try to teach them, because you need to. So this I don't think is happening in statistics, because you got to change the curriculum. You can't still keep teaching layman theory point estimators. Anyway, let's pick up on something. So you have to, because if they are contributing to your field, which means what they are learning is what you should be teaching to your students. And I think there are some issues here that. So my advice to you guys would be to broaden up, and if you can take classes in CS, whatever. UIUC has a strong, very strong CS and engineering programs. Go take them. Because for example, at Berkeley, a lot of computer science students take the core stat classes.
Even here they do, and our students are also encouraged to take courses in CS. Like you said.
So it's very important.
I would like to shortage of time. One very general question popped up in my mind. What do you mean by statistics? What do you mean by data science?
So
I still cannot distinguish. Everyone who is from computer science is doing the same thing that we do is called data science, and the other way around, it's called the statistics. Some people are distinguished, some just based on the person's background or what they're doing. Because one other example, like many tools are being used, and it's called like machine learning, have been developed by statisticians in 80s, 90s, something. But like machine learning as to be what's called like very popular as these days is something that happened, I believe 2005, 10, something around that area started, that many industries trying to use them, but they've already been done for most of the time before then. So still to me, it's not a little bit not. What do you mean by statistics? What do you mean by data science?
So to me, intellectually, not much difference, right? Intellectually, what is statistics? What is data science? It's all basically the same, right? But operationally, if you say that this person is a statistics PhD, this person is a computer science PhD, then you would associate them with different skills, I think. And there is a difference, right? Like this is a course in a statistics department. It's a course in a computer science department. There are some differences. Intellectually, I agree. There's no difference. Everything is the same. Everything involves data. Everything involves modeling. Everything involves drawing conclusions and things like that. So, yes.
Just a vague question, but like since you're saying so, how much people in those other fields actually care about this rate of convergence of cars of dimensionality? Do they even care about that?
Yes, so that's a very good question. You see machine learning people do statistical learning theory, which is all about rates. So that is basically theoretical statistics, right? And actually they can do it at the same level as theoretical statisticians now. So that's fine. Whether all of this is actually useful for drawing conclusions from data, that, if you honestly ask me, I think probably the relevance is somewhat, it's not very strong, I think. So maybe these are theoretical questions which are not very fundamental to data science, I think. So at least the way I tend to do things is, if I'm trying to prove a rate, it might better be for some estimator that is at least useful, as opposed to proving theory for something that is not even, something that anybody might use. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So like is this kind of research, this is relevant, like you're comparing two estimators or two tests in terms of their like performance or something theoretical.
Yes.
So is this type of research still like relevant to people?
So do you want a really honest answer? Or? Yeah. So the thing is, okay. So you're comparing two tests. Are those tests relevant to people? You ask that question first. Like, do people use these tests to make important decisions? If yes, then you are shedding some theoretical light on it. If the test itself nobody is using, then the theory has zero relevance. If you say right now deep learning is being used everywhere, you show some theoretical insight in deep learning that is very, very useful. To give, it's not like in a specific data problem, your result will say something, anything concrete, but it just tells people, some insight into something that people use widely. So that's how you can think of the role of a theoretician is. I mean, it's not like, okay, you can write a paper which is about a test that no one cares about. That's fine. But then that shouldn't stop there. It can, hopefully it'll develop into something that is useful.
I have another question regarding this. So like, so it's basically like transitioning from what is classical to something that is more relevant to the real world nowadays. So like, I mean, classically in a statistics program, we learn a few topics like estimation, testing, things like that. Like, are there certain topics that you recommend that nowadays you should take a basic course on that area? Like, for example, optimization is one thing that people are really interested in nowadays. But like, are there some other courses that you actually recommend?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think if you just take a machine learning class or something from CS department, just to see the flavor at which they do things. Personally, I like Bayesian statistics, which is closely tied to probability. So take some modeling class like applied math or something. They use a lot of models to do things. So if you can take a course like that, take that. Just look at applied math, physics, or whatever, electrical engineering. Take any class that they teach which has something to do with data. And then you can compare with their approach and the way you would learn that in the statistics department. Yeah. Computer vision, for example. It's really a stat problem. You have to do a lot of modeling. See how they are doing things. Can you solve any of those problems using things that you learned from a stat class? Or what the things that they are doing, is it very different from, things like that.
Also, when you're taking those courses many times, the connections may not be very apparent in the very beginning, right? So sometimes I hear students complaining that, oh, this is like completely not useful or not relevant, but it's hard to see the relevance very, very much in the beginning, right? So you can take the help of other people who might have taken those courses or other professors. It's good to be patient and learn them at a systematic level rather than jumping to quick conclusions. Any other last questions?
So why did you decide to go for postdoc and define your decision to go?
I mean, it's just I got this postdoc position and I thought I can spend some time just doing research. So I asked for like a 1-year deferral, but they only said 6 months. So.
Okay, yeah. If there are no further questions, let's thank
Thank you.
Aditya again.
Thank you.